Hold. Story 1. The Whispering Pines Campground. The Henderson family's SUV crawled along the winding dirt road, tires crunching over pine needles and gravel. Jack Henderson gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles whitening as he navigated the increasingly narrow path. His wife Laura studied the wrinkled map, spread across her lap, brow furrowed in concentration. "Are you sure this is right?" Jack asked, peering through the windshield at the dense wall of pines ahead. "I don't remember the turn being this deep into the forest last year." "The ranger said they'd opened a new section," Laura replied, tracing her finger along the faded line. "Supposedly more private, better views of the lake." In the back seat, 16-year-old Ethan and 14-year-old Noah had their faces buried in their phones, desperately trying to capture the last bars of cell service before they disappeared into the digital wilderness for a week. 8-year-old Lily pressed her face against the window, watching the forest grow thicker with each passing minute. "The trees look different here," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. No one heard her. The family's annual camping trip to Whispering Pines had become a tradition born of necessity rather than enthusiasm. Jack insisted it was important for building character and disconnecting, though Laura suspected it was more about recreating his own childhood experiences. The boys tolerated it with typical teenage resignation. Only Lily seemed genuinely excited, her imagination not yet dulled by adolescent cynicism. The trees suddenly parted, revealing a small clearing. A weather-beaten wooden sign welcomed them to Whispering Pines Campground, AD 1953. Below, someone had carved "Where memories last forever" into the aging wood. Finally, Jack sighed, pulling into the gravel lot beside a rustic ranger station. Inside, Ranger Donovan Miller greeted them with practiced cheerfulness that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mid-50s, with a weathered face and salt and pepper beard, he had the look of a man who'd spent decades watching the same trees grow. "The Henderson family," he nodded, checking their reservation. "You're at Site 14, one of our more remote spots." "Is it far from the bathrooms?" Laura asked, already dreading midnight trips through dark woods. The ranger's smile tightened. "Bit of a walk, but worth it for the privacy. Just follow the marked trail and—" He hesitated, eyes darting to Lily, who was examining a display of local wildlife pamphlets. "And stay on the designated paths. Always, especially after dark." Jack laughed, worried about bears. "Among other things," Miller replied, his tone suddenly flat. "The forest gets disorienting at night." As they drove to their campsite, the late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows that danced across the forest floor. Site 14 was indeed isolated, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines that seemed to lean inward, creating the unsettling impression of being watched. "Perfect," Jack declared, surveying the site with satisfaction. "This is real camping." Laura wasn't so sure. The density of the forest here felt oppressive, the silence too complete. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals, just the occasional whisper of wind through pine needles that sounded almost like distant voices. They set up camp with practiced efficiency, Jack and the boys handling the 8-person tent, while Laura and Lily organized the cooking supplies. As Lily arranged stones for a fire ring, she noticed something strange. A perfect circle of withered vegetation about 10 feet from their tent, as if something had drained the life from the plants. "Mom, look at this," she called, pointing to the dead patch. Laura frowned. "Probably just a fungus or something. Don't touch it." As dusk approached, they built a fire and roasted hot dogs on sticks, the familiar ritual providing comfort in the unfamiliar surroundings. Jack attempted ghost stories that the boys mocked for being too tame. The forest around them grew darker, the spaces between trees filling with impenetrable shadow. "Does anyone else feel like the trees are closer than they were before?" Noah asked suddenly, his voice cracking slightly. "Don't be stupid," Ethan scoffed, but his eyes darted nervously to the tree line. Jack laughed too loudly. Your imagination's getting to you. That's the magic of camping, makes everything more vivid. As they prepared for bed, Laura noticed Lily staring intently into the darkness beyond their campfire's glow. "What are you looking at, sweetie?" she asked, following her daughter's gaze but seeing nothing. "The trees are talking to each other," Lily whispered. "Listen." Laura strained to hear, and for a moment caught what sounded like whispered conversations just at the edge of perception. But no, it was just the wind. Had to be. Inside the tent, Lily lay awake long after the others had fallen asleep. The synthetic walls seemed thin protection against whatever watched from the darkness. She tried counting stars through the mesh ceiling panel, but kept losing track, distracted by movements at the corners of her vision, tall, thin shapes moving between distant trees. Around midnight, a sound jolted her fully awake, a soft, deliberate footstep just outside the tent. Then, another, and another. Something was walking slowly around their campsite, circling their tent with measured, patient steps. Lily held her breath, eyes wide in the darkness. The footsteps paused directly beside her section of the tent. She could hear breathing now, slow, raspy, and wrong somehow, as if drawn through a throat not designed for air. Gathering her courage, Lily rolled over to wake her mother and froze. Through the mesh window beside her, silhouetted against the dying embers of their campfire, stood a figure, impossibly tall and thin, with limbs too long and joints that bent in unnatural places. It stood motionless, watching. Its face, if it had one, was lost in shadow. When Lily finally managed to whisper, "Mom," the figure retreated silently into the forest, moving with a fluid grace that defied its awkward proportions. Laura stirred. "What is it, honey?" "There was a thin man watching us," Lily whispered. "He was right outside." Laura pulled her daughter close. "It was just a bad dream. Go back to sleep." But Lily knew what she'd seen, and somehow, as she finally drifted off, she understood with a child's inexplicable certainty that the thin man would return the next night, and he wouldn't be alone. Morning broke with reassuring normalcy, sunlight filtering through the canvas, the sounds of birds gradually returning to the surrounding forest. Lily blinked awake, momentarily disoriented, then remembered the figure from the night before. Had it been a dream? The memory seemed simultaneously vivid and hazy, like trying to recall someone else's experience. At breakfast, she picked at her scrambled eggs, while the others discussed hiking plans. "You're quiet this morning," Jack noted, ruffling her hair. "Sleep okay?" Lily hesitated. "I saw someone outside our tent last night, a really tall, skinny person, just standing there watching us." An uncomfortable silence fell over the picnic table. The boys exchanged glances. "Like Slenderman?" Noah snickered, though his laugh sounded forced. "It wasn't a dream," Lily insisted. "He was real." Laura shot Jack a concerned look. "Honey, we're pretty isolated out here. There's no one around for miles." "Exactly why we picked this spot," Jack added firmly. "No neighbors, no interruptions." Ethan frowned. "Actually, I thought I heard something last night too, like footsteps or something." "Probably just a deer," Jack said, standing abruptly. The day progressed pleasantly enough. They hiked a well-marked trail that wound alongside a clear stream, eventually reaching a rocky outcropping with views across the forest canopy. Lily noticed how the pines stretched endlessly in every direction, creating a dark green sea that concealed whatever might be moving beneath its surface. On their return to camp, they stopped at the small camp store for supplies. While Jack paid for firewood, Lily wandered outside where Ranger Miller was posting weather alerts on a bulletin board. "My family doesn't believe me," she said without preamble, "but I saw a thin man watching our tent last night." The ranger's hand froze mid-task. He slowly turned to look at her, expression unreadable. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. A really tall, skinny man, standing in the trees, watching us. But when I tried to show my mom, he was gone. Miller glanced around, ensuring they were alone. Kids see things in these woods sometimes, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Always tall, always thin, always watching. We don't talk about it much, scares the tourists away. So I'm not crazy? Lily asked, relief flooding through her. No, you're not crazy, he said gravely. But listen to me carefully. If you see them again, don't look directly at them, don't acknowledge them, and whatever you do, don't follow if they beckon you. Then there's more than one? The ranger's weathered face tightened. There are as many as there need to be. Jack emerged from the store, interrupting their conversation. Making friends. Lily pad. Ranger Miller straightened, professional demeanor snapping back into place. Just talking about the local wildlife. You folks be careful out there. Stay in your campsite after dark. Will do, Jack replied cheerfully, clearly missing the urgency in the ranger's tone. As they walked away, Lily looked back to see Miller watching them, concern etched into every line of his face. That evening, unease settled over their campsite like a fog. Even Jack seemed affected, repeatedly checking the surrounding trees. As darkness fell, the fire popped and hissed, sending sparks spiraling upward into the night sky, where they vanished among emerging stars. Maybe we should tell some more ghost stories, Jack suggested with forced enthusiasm. Who wants to start? No one volunteered. The forest had grown unnaturally quiet again. No insects chirping, no night birds calling, just the occasional whisper of wind through pine needles that still sounded disturbingly like distant voices. I read online that this forest is supposed to be haunted, Noah said suddenly, scrolling through his phone where he downloaded information before losing service. There's a bunch of missing persons cases from around here going back decades. That's enough, Laura said sharply. No more ghost stories or internet rumors. But Noah continued reading, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his screen. In 1978, 5 hikers disappeared without a trace in these woods. The only evidence found was a journal belonging to one of them, describing a tall entity that had followed their group for days before. I said that's enough, Laura snapped, her voice cracking with unexpected emotion. Silence fell over the group, broken only by the crackling fire. Ethan stared into the flames, while Lily's eyes remained fixed on the darkness between the trees. There's more of them tonight, she whispered. I can feel them watching. Jack stood abruptly. Everyone in the tent. It's getting late. No one argued. They extinguished the fire with more haste than care and retreated to the relative safety of their tent. Inside, Jack zipped the entrance firmly and switched on the battery-powered lantern, creating a small island of light in the surrounding darkness. Listen, he said, his voice low and serious. I don't want to alarm anyone, but let's all stay together tonight. No wandering off to pee alone, okay? Buddy system, even for bathroom breaks. Laura gave him a questioning look, but he subtly shook his head, not in front of the kids. Hours later, with the others asleep, Jack lay awake listening to the forest. Something felt wrong. The way the darkness pressed against the tent walls. The occasional whisper that wasn't a whisper from just beyond the clearing. He'd been coming to these woods since childhood, but tonight they felt alien, hostile. At precisely 3:17 a.m., everyone in the Henderson family awoke simultaneously. No one spoke. They all heard it. Something circling their tent. Heavy footsteps that sank unnaturally deep into the soil, accompanied by labored, rattling breathing that sounded more like air passing through dried leaves than human lungs. Jack reached slowly for his flashlight. Laura clutched Lily to her chest. The boys huddled together, suddenly looking much younger than their teenage years. The footsteps completed one circuit of the tent, then stopped directly in front of the entrance. The breathing grew louder. Something pressed against the fabric, creating a tall, elongated silhouette, a suggestion of a form that seemed to bend in impossible ways. Jack clicked on the flashlight, and with a surge of desperate courage, unzipped the tent flap and thrust the beam of light into the darkness. Nothing. The clearing was empty, but as the flashlight swept the ground, Jack froze. Surrounding their tent in a perfect circle was a ring of vegetation, withered and blackened, as if all moisture and life had been extracted from it. No one slept again that night. Morning arrived with fog, so thick it transformed the campsite into an island adrift in a gray sea. The circle of dead vegetation surrounding their tent was even more pronounced in daylight, a perfect ring of desiccated plants. The soil beneath turned to dust. "We need to talk to the ranger," Laura said quietly, watching the children pick listlessly at their breakfast. Lily hadn't spoken since waking, her usual exuberance replaced by watchful silence. The boys kept close together, their typical brotherly antagonism suspended in the face of shared unease. Jack nodded. His earlier skepticism evaporated. "I'll drive us to the station after breakfast." "No," Laura said firmly. "We all go. No one stays behind alone." The ranger station was busier than expected. 3 other groups of campers clustered around the counter, all speaking with barely contained agitation. Ranger Miller moved between them, his responses measured, but his expression grave. "Similar experiences," Jack murmured, catching fragments of conversation. "They all heard something last night." They waited their turn. The children huddled on a wooden bench, while Jack and Laura joined the conversation. A bearded man in his 30s gesticulated wildly as he described waking to find his campsite surrounded by dead wildlife, birds, squirrels, and rabbits, arranged in a perfect circle, each drained of blood without visible wounds. "And my son swears he saw people watching from the trees, but they were too tall, too thin to be normal," the man concluded, his voice cracking. "Probably just teenagers playing pranks," Miller replied automatically, but his eyes told a different story. When the Hendersons described their experience, the ranger's professional facade crumbled slightly. He pulled Jack and Laura aside, lowering his voice. "Listen, these woods, they have a history. Most times, it's just a peaceful forest, but sometimes, especially during certain summers, something changes." "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Jack demanded. Miller rubbed his face wearily. "I've worked these woods for 27 years. What I know for certain wouldn't fill a thimble, but I've seen patterns. Every few summers, the sightings start. Then the circles appear, dead vegetation, arranged objects, disturbed soil. Then people go missing." Laura inhaled sharply. "Missing? You didn't think to mention this possibility before renting us a campsite?" "It's been quiet for 6 years," Miller defended, "and it doesn't happen to everyone. Just those they take an interest in." "They?" Jack pressed. The ranger glanced toward the children, then back. "I've never seen them clearly myself. Just glimpses, tall figures, wrong proportions. They seem to observe, select. We don't know what they want, or where they take people." "This is insane," Laura whispered. "We need to leave." "I think that would be wise," Miller agreed. "But first, there's something you should see." He led them into his office and unlocked a filing cabinet, removing a worn leather journal. This was found in 1978, belonging to a hiker named Alan Carver. He was part of a group of 5 that disappeared that summer. It was recovered near their abandoned campsite. Jack took the journal hesitantly, opening to pages marked with a paper clip. The handwriting started neat, but deteriorated into frantic scrawls. "Day 3. We're being followed. I've seen them 3 times now, always at the edge of vision, always gone when I turn fully. The others think I'm imagining things, but Dave admitted this morning he's seen them too, impossibly tall, moving wrong. Day 5. They're getting closer, standing just beyond the firelight at night. They don't seem solid somehow, like they're made of shadows in negative space. Maria wanted to leave, but the trails keep looping back to our campsite. We're lost in less than a square mile of woods. Day 7. They took Chris last night. We heard nothing. His sleeping bag was empty this morning, unzipped from the inside. The trees around the tent were arranged in a perfect circle. The final entry was nearly illegible, the pen having torn through paper in places. They're coming tonight. I can feel it. They don't want us to leave. They want us to join them. The forest is hungry. If found, tell others. Stay away from the circles. Laura closed the journal with trembling hands. Why is this place still open? Why haven't you reported this? Miller laughed bitterly. Reported what? Strange sightings, missing hikers who left no evidence of foul play. The county investigated in the 80s and found nothing. Tourism is the only industry we have left. Besides, he hesitated. The forest provides for those who respect it. The town has an arrangement. An arrangement, Jack repeated incredulously. With what exactly? The ranger's gaze drifted to the window, where fog still shrouded the trees. With whatever has been here longer than us. Most summers pass without incident. Sometimes they just watch. Sometimes they take. We've learned to live with it. Well, we haven't, Laura said decisively. We're leaving now. Back at the campsite, they packed with frantic efficiency. Lily stayed in the car while the others broke down the tent and gathered their belongings. The fog had thinned slightly, but still obscured the forest beyond 50 feet in any direction. As Jack loaded the last cooler, Ethan approached, his voice low. He held out a small bundle of twigs bound with what appeared to be human hair. This was under my sleeping bag. I don't remember seeing it before. Jack stared at the crude object, a cold weight settling in his stomach. Get in the car. As they pulled away from Site 14, Lily pressed her face against the rear window. They're letting us go, she said softly. What do you mean, honey? Laura asked, turning in her seat. The thin people. They're letting us leave because they've already chosen someone else. Jack accelerated sharply, tires spitting gravel. As they rounded the last bend before the main road, the fog momentarily cleared, revealing the forest's edge. Lily gasped. Dozens of impossibly thin, elongated figures stood motionless among the distant trees, their bodies bent at unnatural angles, all facing the departing vehicle. Their features were indistinct even at this distance, just darker smudges where faces should be. Then the fog closed in again, and they were gone. 3 weeks later, Ranger Miller left a terse message on Jack Henderson's voicemail. The campground was temporarily closed, following the disappearance of a family of 4 from Site 16. The only evidence found was their intact tent, surrounded by a circle of desiccated vegetation, and a child's drawing of stick-like figures, watching from the trees. Every summer since, the Hendersons receive an unsigned postcard from Whispering Pines. It contains no message, just a perfect circle drawn in what looks uncomfortably like dried blood, a reminder of the arrangement they narrowly escaped, and the debt that remains unpaid. Story 2. The summer house on Stillwater Lake. You've inherited what? Rachel Reynolds set down her coffee mug, certain she'd misheard her husband. Michael smiled, waving the official-looking letter like a winning lottery ticket. A house on Stillwater Lake in upstate New York, fully paid off, taxes current, all ours. Their small Brooklyn apartment suddenly felt even more cramped in contrast to the possibility of owning an actual house, with a lakefront view, no less. Rachel brushed a strand of dark hair from her face, considering, I didn't know you had family in upstate New York. Neither did I, Michael admitted, rereading the letter. Franklin Pierce was apparently my mother's second cousin. Never met him. He shrugged. Maybe that's why he left us the place. No one closer to leave it to. 16-year-old twins Sophia and Olivia looked up from their phones with rare synchronicity. A lake house? Sophia asked. Interest peaked. Is there Wi-Fi? Olivia added immediately. Michael laughed. Probably not, and that's the best part. Think about it. A whole summer away from the city, swimming, hiking, fishing, a digital detox. The twins exchanged horrified glances.
It's just for the summer, Rachel soothed, warming to the idea despite herself. We can fix it up.
Maybe rent it out afterward. And you two could use a break from screens. We could use a break from this shoebox, Michael muttered, gesturing to their cluttered living room where the girls' textbooks competed for space with his architectural drawings and Rachel's medical journals. 2 weeks later, they packed their Subaru to capacity and headed north, leaving the city's summer heat behind. As metropolitan sprawl gave way to rolling countryside, Rachel felt knots of tension begin to unravel. Maybe they needed this more than they realized. The drive took longer than expected. The GPS failed as they ventured deeper into rural territory, forcing them to rely on increasingly vague directions from locals. By the time they turned onto an unmarked gravel road, labeled only as Lakeshore Drive on their map, dusk was settling over the landscape. Are you sure this is right? Rachel peered through the windshield at the overgrown path ahead. Ancient trees formed a canopy overhead, blocking what remained of the daylight. Has to be, Michael replied, though uncertainty tinged his voice. The lawyer said it's the only road to this side of the lake. The twins had long since abandoned their phones, no signal for the past 20 miles, and now sat silently watching the forest close in around them. The road curved sharply, and suddenly the trees parted to reveal Stillwater Lake. Rachel gasped. The lake stretched before them, vast and perfectly calm, its surface so dark and reflective, it appeared more like polished obsidian than water. The setting sun cast bloody reflections across its surface, creating the unsettling illusion of light emanating from beneath rather than above. It's beautiful, Michael murmured. It's creepy, Olivia countered. Both were right, Rachel thought. Their new property appeared at the end of the road, a 2-story Victorian, perched on a slight rise overlooking the water. Weather-beaten gray clapboards, a wraparound porch sagging in places, shuttered windows like closed eyes. The house had the forlorn look of a place long abandoned. A narrow dock extended from the property into the lake, its wooden planks darkened with age and moisture. Well, Michael said with forced cheerfulness, it's got good bones. They parked and approached cautiously. A rusted key from the lawyer's envelope scraped in the lock before the front door swung open with a groan of protest. The musty scent of disuse enveloped them, sheets draped furniture like funeral shrouds. Dust motes danced in the fading light that filtered through grime-covered windows. Home sweet home, Sophia muttered. Rachel flipped a light switch experimentally. To everyone's surprise, yellow light flooded the entryway from an ornate chandelier overhead. Electricity works, she noted. That's something. They explored room by room, pulling sheets from furniture that proved surprisingly well preserved. Heavy wooden pieces built in an era when things were made to last. The kitchen contained ancient appliances, but the refrigerator hummed to life when plugged in. Upstairs, they found 4 bedrooms with iron-framed beds and faded quilts. This place is frozen in time, Michael observed, running his hand along a dusty bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes. The house was fully furnished, as if Franklin Pierce had simply walked out one day, expecting to return. Family photographs dotted the walls, stern-faced men and women from another era, their eyes following the newcomers through layers of dust. Why would your cousin just abandon this place fully furnished? Rachel wondered aloud. Michael shrugged. The lawyer mentioned he moved into assisted living about 5 years ago. Guess he thought he'd come back eventually. As darkness fell, they settled in as best they could, clearing dust from necessary surfaces and making up beds with linens found in a cedar chest. The house creaked and settled around them, each noise amplified in the rural silence. Rachel stood at the bedroom window, gazing at the lake. Without city light pollution, stars reflected perfectly on the obsidian surface, creating the disorienting impression of a sky both above and below. The longer she stared, the more the boundary between reflection and reality seemed to blur. Was that movement beneath the surface a flash of light where no star should be? She blinked, and it was gone. Later that night, as the others slept, Rachel was awakened by a rhythmic sound from outside, a gentle lapping of water against the shore, though there had been no wind to disturb the lake's surface. Rising quietly, she returned to the window. The lake was perfectly still again, but at the end of their dock, a solitary figure stood silhouetted against the starlight, the unmistakable outline of a man, motionless, staring into the depths. Rachel squinted, trying to make out details. The proportions seemed wrong somehow. The arms too long, the head too small, and were those clothes, or something else entirely that hung from its frame? She turned to wake Michael, but when she looked back, the dock was empty. Only ripples on the previously mirror-like surface suggested anything had been there at all. Sleep eluded her for the remainder of the night. "You saw someone on our dock?" Michael frowned over his coffee the next morning. "Could have been a fisherman. This is probably a popular spot. At 3 in the morning?" Rachel shook her head. "And I checked. The gate at the road was locked when we arrived. This is private property all the way around this cove." Michael shrugged. "We'll check with the neighbors. Maybe it's normal around here." The kitchen looked better in daylight, vintage rather than decrepit, with worn but solid countertops, and a cast-iron stove that had been built to outlast its owners. Rachel had found coffee and filters in a cupboard, surprisingly still sealed and usable. The twins entered, looking surprisingly refreshed, despite the strange surroundings. "There's no internet, but I found a bookshelf full of actual books," Sophia announced, holding up a dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby. "And I found a rowboat under a tarp by the dock," Olivia added. "Let's check if it's seaworthy first," Michael cautioned. Rachel nodded. "And find out more about our mysterious benefactor. I want to know why Franklin Pierce abandoned this place with everything still in it." The nearest town, Lakewood, was 15 miles away, a collection of weathered buildings arranged around a single main street. The general store doubled as a post office and community bulletin board. Its proprietor, Harold Jenkins, was arranging fishing lures in a display case when they entered, a bell above the door announcing their arrival. "You must be the new folks at the Pierce place," he said without looking up. In a town this small, strangers were noteworthy. "Word travels fast." Michael smiled, extending his hand. "Michael Reynolds. My wife Rachel, daughters Sophia and Olivia." Jenkins nodded curtly, barely glancing at Michael's outstretched hand. "We don't get many newcomers, especially not at that house." The twins wandered off to examine candy displays, while Rachel approached the counter. "Did you know Franklin Pierce?" she asked. Jenkins' hand stilled. Everyone knew Franklin, not that anyone understood him. He finally looked up, studying Rachel's face. "Family resemblance, though not much. You have the same eyes." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "We never met him. Actually, the inheritance was a complete surprise." "That's so?" Jenkins' tone suggested skepticism. "Well, Franklin kept to himself mostly, especially those last few years." "What can you tell us about him?" Michael pressed. The lawyer didn't have many details. Jenkins' absently rearranged lures came from old money, local family going back generations, odd duck, even by local standards. Spent most nights out on that dock of his, just staring into the lake, said he was keeping watch. The shopkeeper's voice changed slightly on those last words, as if quoting something he'd heard many times. "Keeping watch for what?" Rachel asked. Jenkins glanced toward the twins, then lowered his voice. "Look, the lake has stories, old ones. Every body of water collects its share of tragedy, but Stillwater's got more than most. Franklin was obsessed with them." He straightened. "But that's just local color. Nothing to worry about. His abrupt change in demeanor suggested otherwise. They purchased groceries and basic supplies, plus a local history book Rachel spotted near the register. As they prepared to leave, Jenkins called after them. Word of advice? Stay off the lake after dark. Water can play tricks on the eyes at night, make you see things that aren't there, or worse, things that are. Back at the house, while Michael and the girls unloaded groceries, Rachel flipped through the local history book. Most of it contained expected small-town fare, founding families, agricultural developments, local landmarks. But toward the end, she found a brief section about Stillwater Lake. The lake's unusual depth, over 300 feet at its center, and lack of visible tributaries, has spawned numerous local legends. Most notorious is the 1891 incident in which the lakeside village of Stillwater Mills reportedly experienced a single night of mass disappearance. Contemporary accounts claim that 47 residents vanished overnight, leaving meals half-eaten and doors unlocked. The sole survivor, 8-year-old Mary Holloway, provided confused testimony about singing from the lake and people coming up from the water. Authorities attributed the disappearance to a sudden exodus following industrial pollution from the local mill, though no bodies were ever recovered, nor were the missing persons ever traced to other settlements. A cold uneasiness settled over Rachel. She closed the book as Michael entered. "The girls and I checked out the boat," he announced cheerfully. "Just needs a little patching. Should be lake-worthy by tomorrow." Rachel nodded distractedly. "Michael, I think we should learn more about this place before we get too comfortable. Something feels off." "Like what?" "Like why a man we've never met would leave us a valuable property. Like why the locals get strange when we mention the house. Like why I saw someone or something on our dock last night." Michael sat beside her, taking her hand. "Look, every small town has its quirks and ghost stories. It's part of the charm. We're city people. All this quiet and darkness is bound to play tricks on us at first." "Maybe," Rachel conceded, "but the girls and I will stick to shore until we know more. You can test your boat repairs without us." That afternoon, they focused on making the house livable, cleaning, dusting, opening windows to release the stale air. Olivia discovered a door in the kitchen that opened onto narrow stairs leading downward. "Mom, Dad, there's a basement." The basement consisted of a single large room with rough stone walls and a packed dirt floor. A bulb dangling from exposed wiring provided weak illumination. Metal shelves lined the walls, containing preserved foods in ancient mason jars, gardening tools, and fishing equipment. In one corner stood a workbench covered with electrical components, notebooks, and what appeared to be modified recording equipment. Pierce was a tinkerer, Michael observed, examining a partially disassembled radio. Sophia pointed to a door in the far wall, solid wood with a heavy padlock securing it. "What's in there?" "Probably just storage," Michael replied, but Rachel noted how he lingered, studying the lock with professional interest. "We should respect his privacy," she said firmly. "Just because he left us the house doesn't mean we should go through all his personal things." But later, after the twins had gone to bed, she found Michael in the basement again, examining the locked door with a flashlight and screwdriver. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Just curious," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "This lock isn't original to the door. It's newer, probably installed in the last decade. Makes me wonder what's important enough to secure in an already hidden room." "Michael, this isn't our—" "It is our house now," he interrupted. "Legally, everything here belongs to us, including whatever's behind this door." Before she could protest further, he wedged the screwdriver between the door and frame, applying pressure until the wood splintered around the lock plate. With a crack, the mechanism tore free. "Michael!" Rachel exclaimed, but he was already pushing the door open, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness beyond. The room was small, perhaps 8 by 10 feet, with no windows. A single wooden chair faced the far wall. The concrete floor was littered with dozens of Polaroid photographs, scattered as if dropped in haste. On the wall, a large map of Stillwater Lake was marked with red X's concentrated near the center, the deepest part. Michael picked up one of the photographs. His expression changed. The Polaroid showed the lake's surface at night, photographed from what appeared to be their dock. In the center of the image, a faint greenish light glowed beneath the water. Another photo showed the same scene, but with the light closer to the surface. Another showed what might have been a hand, pale, elongated, with too many joints, breaking the water's surface. What the hell was he photographing? Michael whispered. Rachel examined the map, noting dates written beside each X. He was tracking something. Over years. She pointed to a notebook on the chair. Look at this. The journal contained meticulous notes spanning decades. June 17th, 1985. Movement beneath the eastern cove. No surface breach. August 3rd, 1991. Voices again tonight. 3 distinct patterns. Recording apparatus failed when submersion attempted. May 22nd, 2001. They're coming closer to the surface each summer. Water temperature 4 degrees warmer than previous measurements. July 15th, 2017. They know I'm watching. Found wet footprints on the dock this morning. Not human. Planning to install more secure locks. The final entry, dated just months before Franklin Pierce had entered assisted living, read simply, "They're waiting for me to leave." This is, Michael struggled for words. The work of a disturbed mind. Rachel finished firmly. But even as she said it, Rachel remembered the figure on the dock, and the strange rippling light she thought she'd glimpsed beneath the water's surface. "We should go upstairs," she said quietly. Neither slept well that night. "I found some really cool old cameras in the boathouse," Olivia announced at breakfast the next morning. She placed a dusty Polaroid camera on the kitchen table. "This one still has film in it." Michael and Rachel exchanged glances. "Where exactly did you find that?" Michael asked carefully. "In a waterproof trunk, under some tarps. There's like 5 more just like it, plus all these weird underwater lights and microphones." Rachel took the camera gently. "Olivia, I want you and Sophia to stay away from the lake today. Your father and I need to discuss some things about the house." "What things?" Sophia asked, suddenly alert to the tension between her parents. "Just boring adult stuff about the property," Michael said too quickly. "Why don't you two explore the attic instead? Might be some cool vintage clothes or records up there." After the twins reluctantly headed upstairs, Rachel confronted Michael. "We need to talk about what's happening here," she said quietly. "First the figure on the dock, now these cameras and equipment. There's something wrong with this lake, and Franklin Pierce knew it." Michael ran a hand through his hair. "Look." The old man was clearly obsessed with something. Maybe he thought he saw the Loch Ness Monster's American cousin. That doesn't mean there's actually anything in the water. "Then explain what I saw on the dock." "Shadows. Imagination. Lead had a long drive. You were exhausted." Rachel's frustration mounted. "And the locals? The way they clam up when we mention the house? The missing villagers in the history book?" Michael sighed. "Small towns thrive on legends. It gives them identity, draws tourists. I'm not saying nothing tragic ever happened here, but transforming historical tragedies into supernatural mysteries is what humans do." Before Rachel could respond, a scream from upstairs sent them both running. They found the twins in the attic, Sophia comforting a visibly shaken Olivia. "What happened?" Rachel demanded. Olivia pointed wordlessly to an old steamer trunk they'd opened. Inside lay antique clothing, yellowed papers, and dozens more Polaroid photographs, these far older, dating back to the 1970s. The images showed the same scene as those in the basement room. The lake at night, strange lights beneath the surface, but these earlier photos captured more. In one, a distinctly humanoid figure emerged partially from the water, its elongated body glistening in moonlight, face a smooth blank oval. In another, 3 such figures stood on the shore, their proportions wrong, arms too long, torsos too narrow, legs jointed in too many places. "The thin people from the lake," Olivia whispered. "They're real." Rachel gathered her daughter close, while Michael examined the photos, his skepticism visibly crumbling. "We're leaving," Rachel announced. "Today, pack only essentials." No one argued. As Michael and the twins gathered their belongings, Rachel returned to the basement, drawn by a nagging sense that they were missing something important. In the secret room, she examined the map more carefully, noting how the X's formed a pattern, extending from the lake's center directly toward their house. The journal entries took on new significance. She flipped to earlier pages, finding references to cycles and hibernation periods and selection criteria. One passage caught her eye. The entities select a watcher for each cycle. "The house was built here deliberately by my great-grandfather. After his selection, each Pierce generation maintains the watch, until relieved by selection of new watchers. I have served for 41 years. My time grows short. They become restless when transition approaches." Rachel's blood ran cold. She turned to the final pages, finding what she'd feared. "I have made arrangements. The family line continues through my cousin's son. I have never met them, but blood calls to blood. The house will pass to them when I can no longer maintain the watch. The lake has shown me their faces in its depths. They will come when called." Attached to the page was a yellowed newspaper clipping, a birth announcement for Michael James Reynolds, born to Margaret Pierce Reynolds and James Reynolds, June 15, 1980. A sudden crash from upstairs jolted Rachel from her horrified trance. She ran up the basement stairs to find Michael standing transfixed before the living room window, staring at the lake. The twins huddled on the sofa, clinging to each other. "Michael," she called. He didn't respond. Outside, the previously clear day had transformed. Dense fog rolled off the lake, enveloping the property in a white shroud. The water's surface had turned mirror-like, reflecting not the sky above, but something else entirely. What appeared to be inverted structures beneath the surface. Streets. Movement. "He's sleepwalking," Sophia whispered. "We found him just standing here. He won't wake up." Rachel approached her husband cautiously. His eyes were open but unseeing, fixed on the lake's surface. She touched his arm, ice cold. "Michael, wake up," she urged, shaking him gently, then more vigorously. "Michael." After what seemed an eternity, he blinked, awareness returning slowly to his features. "Rachel, what?" He swayed, disoriented. "You were in some kind of trance," she explained, guiding him to the sofa, staring at the lake. "I heard singing," he murmured. "Beautiful voices. They were calling my name, showing me a place, under the water, a city." Rachel described what she'd found in the journal. Michael listened in growing horror. "So, I'm related to Pierce? And he left us this house because... what? I'm supposed to be the next watcher of whatever lives in that lake?" "We need to leave right now," Rachel insisted. "Pack the car. We'll find a hotel." But as Michael moved toward the stairs, he staggered suddenly, clutching his head. The singing, it's starting again. Outside, the fog thickened. The dock was barely visible from the house, yet they all clearly saw a figure standing at its end, the silhouette of Franklin Pierce, though they knew that was impossible. He raised one arm, beckoning. "Don't look at the water," Rachel warned, pulling the twins close. "Don't listen to any voices you hear. We're leaving through the back door." They moved as a group toward the kitchen, but the rear exit opened onto impenetrable white fog. Every window showed the same. They were surrounded, cut off from escape. The car, Michael suggested, his voice strained as he fought whatever pull he felt. We can just drive through it. Rachel nodded, gathering the girls while Michael collected the car keys. They stepped onto the front porch, the wooden boards slick with condensation. Through the swirling white, they could just make out their vehicle 30 feet away. Stay together, Rachel instructed. Hold hands. Don't let go no matter what. They descended the porch steps and moved cautiously through the fog. The air felt dense, resistant, as if they waded through water rather than mist. Sounds were muffled, except for a faint, melodic humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Halfway to the car, Michael stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. "Ignore it," Rachel urged. "Keep moving." But Olivia had frozen too. "It's so beautiful," she murmured, her eyes taking on the same vacant quality Rachel had seen in Michael earlier. "Olivia, no." Rachel grabbed her daughter's shoulders. "Don't listen." Sophia clutched her twin's hand desperately. "Liv, look at me. Just look at me." The humming intensified, resolving into wordless voices that somehow conveyed meaning. Welcome, home, return, below. Michael shook himself, fighting the influence. The car now. They pressed forward, finally reaching the vehicle. Michael's hands trembled as he tried to fit the key into the lock. The fog swirled more aggressively around them, forming tendrils that seemed to reach and grasp. "Hurry," Rachel urged, glancing back toward the lake. The mist had thinned just enough to reveal the dock, and the figures now gathering there. Not just the Franklin Pierce silhouette, but dozens more, their elongated forms distorted and fluid, as if caught between states of matter, all watching, all waiting. Michael finally got the door unlocked. They piled in, the twins in the back seat, Rachel beside Michael as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. "Don't stop for anything," Rachel instructed, as Michael threw the car into reverse. They backed down the driveway, tires crunching on gravel, then spun onto the narrow access road. The fog clung to them, moving against natural air currents to follow their vehicle. In the rearview mirror, Rachel saw figures emerging from the mist behind them, unnaturally tall and thin, pursuing with a gliding movement that was almost graceful. The road curved sharply where it approached the lake one final time before turning toward the main highway. As they rounded this bend, Michael slammed on the brakes. The road ahead had vanished. In its place, the lake stretched before them, its surface now completely mirror-like, but instead of reflecting the world above, it showed what appeared to be an inverted underwater community. Houses built in Victorian style like their own, streets laid out in familiar patterns, and dozens of pale figures looking up at them from below, arms outstretched in welcome. Most terrifying of all, Rachel recognized the figures. Everyone did. They wore their own faces. Michael, Rachel, Sophia, Olivia, but wrong somehow. Too pale, eyes too large, smiles too wide. "Turn around," Rachel screamed. Michael wrenched the steering wheel, reversing course. They sped back toward the house, the only other option being to drive straight into the lake, into that inverted reflection of themselves. As they approached the house again, the mist parted to reveal their escape route, the overgrown service road they'd noticed on arrival, but dismissed as impassable. Michael didn't hesitate, turning sharply onto the narrow track. Branches scratched against the car's exterior as they bounced and jolted down the rough path. "They're following," Sophia cried, looking out the rear window. Rachel turned to see the mist itself pursuing them, moving with purpose, unnatural speed. Within it, those elongated figures kept pace, their movements jerky yet fluid, like underwater footage played at the wrong speed. The car bottomed out on a particularly deep rut, the undercarriage scraping rock with a shower of sparks. Michael cursed, but pressed on. The forest grew denser, branches forming a tunnel overhead. The service road seemed endless, turning back on itself, disorienting them. "Are we going in circles?" Rachel asked, panic rising. "No," Michael insisted, though uncertainty laced his voice. "The main road has to be ahead." The car burst from the tree line suddenly. Tires finding asphalt, Michael swerved onto the county highway, accelerating hard. Behind them, the mist roiled at the forest's edge, but didn't advance further. They drove in stunned silence for several miles before Michael spoke. "It wanted us," he said simply. "The lake." Rachel nodded, thinking of the journal, the photos, the strange inheritance. "We were chosen, like the Pierces before us." "What happens now?" Olivia asked, her voice small. No one had an answer. They drove through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Stillwater Lake. 3 days later, from a motel in Pennsylvania, Michael contacted a real estate attorney to discuss selling the property. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Reynolds," the lawyer informed him after researching the deed. "The property includes unusual restrictions. It cannot be sold, only inherited through family lines. It reverts to the county only in the event the Pierce-Reynolds bloodline is extinguished." They never returned to the lake house, but each year on the anniversary of their inheritance, the family awakens at precisely 2:38 a.m., drawn from sleep by the sound of water lapping at non-existent shores, and distant, beautiful singing that only they can hear. And in their dreams they see their reflections waiting beneath still waters, growing more impatient with each passing year. Story 3 The Firefly Festival. Cassandra Wright adjusted her camera's aperture as afternoon sunlight filtered through the dust-streaked window of her motel room. Outside the small town of Meridian Grove, Oklahoma, baked under the June heat, its main street nearly deserted in the late-day lull. The sign at the town limits had proclaimed population 1,203, though Cassandra suspected that number hadn't been updated in decades. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of Zoe Kim, her 24-year-old production assistant, who balanced 3 coffees in a cardboard tray. "Please tell me one of those is for me." Cassandra smiled, setting down her camera. "One for you, one for me, and one for when Ben finally decides to emerge from editing hell." Zoe nodded toward the adjoining room where Ben Taylor, their sound engineer, had sequestered himself with headphones and equipment since their arrival that morning. "Any progress getting interviews lined up?" Zoe nodded, her usual efficiency evident despite the sweltering conditions. "Mayor Cooper is meeting us for dinner at the only restaurant in town. The Historical Society president tomorrow morning, and I've got a list of longtime residents willing to talk about the festival." Cassandra took the coffee with gratitude. At 42, with 3 documentaries under her belt, all critically acclaimed but commercially modest, she felt this project could be her breakthrough. Small-town rituals, America's forgotten celebrations, had secured decent funding, and the Meridian Grove Firefly Festival was to be its centerpiece. "What's our angle on this one?" Zoe asked, perching on the edge of the bed. "Standard folklore piece?" Cassandra considered. "There's something more here. Most small-town festivals have clear origins, agricultural, religious, historical, but this one's different. The town records are vague about how it started, just that it's been happening every summer solstice since 1907. And the fireflies perform on cue? Sounds like a tourist trap." "That's just it. They don't advertise it. Barely anyone outside a 50-mile radius knows it exists. Most firefly displays are random, but witnesses describe these moving in complex patterns, almost like choreography." Ben appeared in the doorway connecting their rooms, headphones around his neck. His perpetual stubble and disheveled appearance belied his meticulous approach to audio work. "You need to hear something," he said without preamble, gesturing for them to follow. In his room, sound equipment covered every surface, transforming the budget motel accommodation into a professional studio. Ben sat at his laptop, clicking through audio files. "I was doing preliminary sound tests at the festival grounds, that field on the edge of town, recording ambient noise for baseline levels. He selected a file and turned up the volume. Listen. At first, Cassandra heard nothing unusual. Wind rustling through grass, distant birdsong, the occasional car passing on the highway beyond the town. I don't, she began. Wait for it, Ben interrupted, adjusting levels on his mixer. Then she heard it. A faint, rhythmic clicking beneath the natural sounds, almost mechanical in its precision, yet organic in quality. A pattern repeated every 17 seconds. Click, click, pause, click, 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 clong, pause. What is that? Zoe leaned closer to the speakers. No idea, Ben replied. But it's coming from the ground in the center of that field, and it's not any insect I've ever heard. Cassandra felt a familiar tingle, the sensation that had led her to her most compelling stories. Let's keep this to ourselves for now. I want to hear what the locals say without prompting. That evening, they met Mayor Samuel Cooper at Meridian Grove's Soul Restaurant, a diner called The Hearth that seemed frozen in the 1950s, complete with vinyl booths and waitresses in subtle variations of the same uniform they'd probably worn for decades. Cooper was younger than Cassandra expected, perhaps 45, with a politician's firm handshake and practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He wore a suit despite the heat, not a wrinkle in sight. We're so pleased you've taken an interest in our little tradition, he said after they'd ordered. Though I admit, I'm surprised anyone outside of Oklahoma has even heard of it. That's what makes it perfect for our documentary, Cassandra explained. Cooper nodded appreciatively. The Firefly Festival is certainly authentic. Been part of Meridian Grove since the beginning. The beginning of what, exactly? Ben asked. Something flickered across the mayor's face, so brief Cassandra nearly missed it. Caution? Calculation? Then the polished smile returned. The town's founding, of course. 1907. Oklahoma had just become a state. And the festival started immediately? Cassandra pressed. Most traditions evolve over time. Cooper dabbed his lips with a napkin. The founder, Jeremiah Grove, established it the first summer. He had a particular interest in natural phenomena. What makes these fireflies special? Zoe asked. We've read accounts of unusual flight patterns. The mayor's reply was interrupted by the arrival of their food. As the waitress set down plates, Cassandra noticed how the woman's smile faltered when she overheard their conversation. Her name tag read Dorothy. She appeared to be in her 70s, with hands gnarled from decades of carrying trays. You folks here for the festival? Dorothy asked, her Oklahoma drawl pronounced. They're making a documentary, Cooper explained, a warning note in his voice. Dorothy's smile disappeared entirely. About our fireflies? Why would anyone care about that? That's what makes it interesting, Cassandra replied. Unique natural phenomenon, tied to local tradition. We'd love to interview you too, if you've attended many festivals. Every one since I was born, Dorothy said flatly. Nothing special about it. Just bugs, lighting up. She walked away stiffly. You'll have to excuse Dorothy, Cooper said smoothly. Older generations suspicious of outsiders, showing too much interest in local affairs. What's there to be suspicious about? Ben asked bluntly. Cooper laughed, though it sounded forced. Nothing at all. We're just private folks. The festival is special to us. Sacred, in a way. Sacred? Cassandra repeated, interest piqued. Poor word choice. Cooper backtracked. I meant cherished. The conversation shifted to logistics, but Cassandra's mind lingered on the mayor's slip and the waitress's reaction. Something about their festival made locals protective, even defensive. After dinner, they walked back to their motel in the gathering twilight. Main Street was eerily quiet for a summer evening. Most businesses already closed despite the early hour. As they passed the town hall, Cassandra noticed a stone monument she'd missed earlier. A granite obelisk inscribed with names and a single line of text at the bottom. Their sacrifice ensures our prosperity. War memorial? Zoe suggested. Wrong design, Ben replied. And those dates span decades, not just war years. Cassandra examined the most recent names, added within the last 5 years. We should find out who these people were. Back at the motel, they compared notes. The three had worked together long enough to develop instincts about when a story ran deeper than its surface. They're hiding something, Ben stated flatly. Obviously, Zoe agreed. But what? It's just a firefly display. Cassandra stared out the window at the darkened town. In the distance, the field where the festival would take place in 2 days remained completely dark, unusual for firefly season, when at least some early insects should be visible. Everyone we've talked to gives slightly different answers about the festival's origins, she noted. The Historical Society says it celebrates the town's founding. The mayor linked it to the founders' interest in natural phenomena, but the town librarian mentioned something about a pact or agreements before catching herself. Sounds like classic small-town myth-building, Ben suggested. Create mystery to make a natural event seem supernatural. Maybe, Cassandra conceded. But why be so protective about it? And why not capitalize on tourism potential if it's as spectacular as described? Zoe yawned. Maybe they're smuggling fireflies across state lines. Illegal bug trafficking. Despite the tension, they laughed. Cassandra closed her notebook. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we interview the Historical Society and scout the festival grounds properly. Later that night, Cassandra was awakened by a soft, persistent tapping at her window. Disoriented, she fumbled for her phone, checking the time 3:17 a.m. The tapping continued. She approached the window cautiously and pulled back the curtain. A single firefly hovered outside her second-story window, its light pulsing in the same rhythm Ben had captured in his recording. Click, click, pause, click, 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 long pause. As she watched, another joined it, then another, until a dozen insects blinked in perfect synchronization. More disturbing than their coordinated display was the impossibility of their position. Fireflies didn't hover in formation, and certainly not outside a second-floor window with no nearby trees or plants. As she watched, transfixed, the insects arranged themselves into a distinct pattern, a circle with a dot at its center. They held this formation for precisely 17 seconds before dispersing simultaneously in different directions, their lights extinguishing as if switched off. Cassandra stood frozen by the window long after they'd gone, unable to explain what she'd witnessed, or shake the unsettling feeling that she hadn't been observing the fireflies. They had been observing her. The Meridian Grove Historical Society occupied the town's original schoolhouse, a brick building dwarfed by ancient oak trees. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and wood polish. Display cases housed town artifacts, farming implements, vintage photographs, newspaper clippings preserved under glass. Eleanor Blackwood, the society's president, was a severe woman in her 80s, with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her posture remained ramrod straight as she guided them through the modest collection. Jeremiah Grove founded the town after discovering the lake and surrounding lands during a surveying expedition, she explained, indicating a faded portrait of a stern-faced man with a prominent mustache. He brought 17 families with him to establish the settlement in 1907. Was he a scientist? Cassandra asked, remembering the mayor's comment about Grove's interest in natural phenomena. Did he document the firefly behaviors? Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes, the same guarded look Cassandra had noticed in others. He kept journals. Most were lost in the town hall fire of '63. Most? Ben pressed. So some survived? Eleanor's lips thinned. Fragments. Nothing of interest to outsiders. Zoe, who had wandered to a far corner, called over. What's this? She stood before a small display case, containing what appeared to be a glass jar. with air holes punched in its metal lid. Inside was a desiccated insect specimen, larger than a typical firefly, with an unusual anatomical structure. Eleanor moved, with surprising speed, to position herself between Zoe and the display. Just an unusual specimen found locally. Mutation, most likely. Cassandra joined them, studying the preserved insect. Its abdomen was elongated and segmented differently than normal fireflies, and what remained of its wings showed an unusual filament structure. "Has it been scientifically classified?" she asked. "Local curiosity only," Eleanor dismissed. But Cassandra persisted. "I noticed a monument in the town square with names and dates. It mentioned sacrifices. What's the story there?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Those are our honored citizens who left to serve their country or pursue opportunities elsewhere," she said stiffly. "The inscription is merely poetic. Their departure was a sacrifice for the town, as we lost their contributions to the community." The explanation made logical sense, but felt hollow. Before Cassandra could push further, the door opened, and Mayor Cooper entered with artificial cheer. "Ah, Miss Wright, I see you're getting the historical background from our Eleanor." He placed a proprietary hand on the older woman's shoulder. "I hope you don't mind, but I've arranged for you to meet some festival participants. The preparations are quite fascinating." The abrupt change of subject was obvious, but Cassandra recognized when doors were closing. She nodded, signaling to her team, "We'd love that. Let me just take a few photos of the displays before we go." While Cooper and Eleanor conferred in hushed tones, Cassandra discreetly photographed the unusual specimen and the founding documents in their display cases. One partially visible map caught her attention. It showed Meridian Grove's original layout, with the festival field marked not as public space, but as the Covenant ground. Outside, Cooper led them to his SUV. "The festival committee is meeting at the field. I thought you might appreciate seeing some of the preparation rituals." As they drove, Cassandra broached the subject directly. "Mayor Cooper, we've heard references to a pact or covenant related to the festival. Could you elaborate?" Cooper's knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel. "Just local color. Every tradition accumulates folklore over a century. Some say Jeremiah Grove made a deal with nature itself to ensure the town's prosperity. Crops would never fail. Industry would thrive. Disaster would pass us by, in exchange for honoring the natural world through our solstice celebration. Has it worked?" Ben asked skeptically. Cooper's smile returned. "Meridian Grove has never experienced a major natural disaster. Our agricultural yields consistently outperform similar regions, and our employment rate remains near perfect, despite the economic challenges facing similar rural communities. So yes, Mr. Taylor, one might say it has worked quite well." The festival field appeared ahead, 20 acres of flat grassland, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides, with the town behind it. A dozen people worked in the field's center, arranging what appeared to be decorative elements: wooden posts draped with fabric, stone bowls positioned at precise intervals, garlands of fresh flowers, forming concentric circles. "Your typical small-town fair setup," Cooper explained as they parked. But Cassandra had attended enough small-town festivals to know this was anything but typical. The preparations had a ritualistic precision to them. Measurements were being taken between elements, positions marked with unusual care. No carnival rides, no vendor booths, no stage for performances, just concentric circles designed to focus attention inward. An older man approached as they exited the vehicle. His weathered face suggested decades of outdoor work, his overalls contrasting with the formal attire of others present. "William Thatcher," Cooper introduced him, "4th-generation resident and head of our festival committee." Thatcher nodded curtly, his expression guarded. "You're the documentary people. We appreciate you allowing us to film," Cassandra said warmly, extending her hand. Thatcher ignored the gesture. Some rules if you're going to be here. No recording during the calling ceremony. No disrupting the circles once they're formed. And most importantly, he leaned closer, his voice dropping. No recording the fireflies dance in its entirety. You can film portions, but not the complete sequence. May I ask why? Cassandra kept her tone neutral. Tradition, Thatcher replied flatly. Superstition, Cooper added with an apologetic smile. Thatcher's expression hardened further. Not superstition, respect. He turned to Cooper. Your grandfather would never have allowed it. Times change, Will, Cooper replied smoothly. Documentation preserves traditions for future generations. Some things aren't meant to be preserved that way. Cooper sighed. Please excuse William. The older generation can be traditional. What exactly happens at this festival? Beyond watching fireflies, community gathering, traditional songs, storytelling, Cooper replied. Then at precisely 9:17 p.m., the fireflies emerge and begin their display. It typically lasts until midnight. And people just watch bugs for 3 hours? Zoe asked skeptically. You'll understand when you see it, Cooper assured them. It's quite mesmerizing. They spent the afternoon filming preparation activities, though Cassandra noted how certain areas remained off-limits, with committee members blocking access or disrupting shots. The team was politely but firmly prevented from examining the stone bowls or the central arrangement, where workers were embedding metal rods in a precise geometric pattern. As evening approached, Cassandra suggested the team split up to gather more information before dinner. Ben would continue sound testing at the field, Zoe would photograph the town's preparations, and Cassandra would conduct informal interviews with residents. At the local diner, Cassandra found Dorothy, the waitress from the previous night, counting silverware for the evening service. May I ask you something off the record? Cassandra approached carefully. Dorothy glanced around the empty restaurant. Depends what you're asking. What really happens at the festival? The truth. The older woman's hand stilled. Why are you really here, Miss Wright? There are festivals in every town across America. What made you choose ours? The question caught Cassandra off guard. Their research team had flagged Meridian Grove, based on obscure forum post, describing unusual insect behavior, but nothing that should cause this level of protectiveness. We're documenting disappearing American traditions, she answered truthfully, if incompletely. Dorothy studied her face for a long moment. The fireflies choose, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Choose what? Who stays and who goes? The older woman resumed arranging cutlery. Been that way since the beginning. The town prospers, and every few years, someone leaves to ensure it. Leaves? You mean the names on the monument? Dorothy nodded almost imperceptibly. Some go willing, some don't, but they go. Go where, exactly? The waitress's eyes flicked toward the windows, toward the darkening forest beyond the town limits. With them, the light bringers. We don't ask questions about where. That wasn't part of the covenant.